Hello and welcome to today's video. In this one, as the title suggests, will be a set review on the Mercenary Set. Now I've chosen to do this set over the Raiders as most of you have voted on my last poll wanted to see this one instead. And if you want to be involved in future polls on what set I choose, then make sure you do get subscribed as your opinion does matter. Within this video we'll be covering what this set is and what abilities they'll be looking to use, having a look at the battles and seeing what sort of battles favour them and which ones they struggle in, and finally how they compare against other popular options over a range of different situations, and whether they're even worth going for right now. Now before I do continue this one, I should mention I only have this set until the 27th of this month or September if you're seeing this video later, as I do have to give this set back afterwards. But I already have done set reviews on the Blade King and Nameless King, so it could be worth checking them out first if they're more up your street and more for what you need, and see if you like how I present the videos. So starting off, let's talk about what the Mercenary Set can do at the 6-piece stage, as that's what people will be trying to aim for. I should also point out that this and the Van Helsing set are the only archers that can heal through their abilities, but since I don't have the Van Helsing, I can't compare their healing abilities to anything, but I will mention them later on anyway. So let's talk about what the Mercenary Set can do. Firstly, each shot has a 30% chance of enhancing the damage done by a nearby ally by 80% for 3.5 seconds, and up to 3 effects at a time. Now this is most likely meaning up to 3 different fighters at the same time and not stackable on the same fighter. But since archers like the Dragonborn have a tendency to deal the most damage, this ability will be most welcome for anyone who's using a Dragonborn for that additional damage. We can also assume that this ability will happen frequently as pistols have a fast rate of fire and 30% is going to be a high value in combination with this. The next paragraph is going to be crucial to anyone struggling with enemy tanks at the minute, and once in a while the Mercenary Set fires a lead shot at a nearby enemy, so meaning tanks, and the shot hits all nearby enemies within a small radius, so it's not likely to even hit the mages, so just bear this in mind. But anyone hit will be silenced for 2 seconds, meaning their weapons and armor abilities cannot be used. This will make them vulnerable to a vital blow, but this doesn't stop their set abilities from working, meaning some sets will actually be fine. But this isn't the main ability. What makes the Mercenary Set good against tanks is the next bit. The enemy who takes the lead shot will take 300,000 physical damage, and the other tanks nearby will take a similar amount. But this next bit is unclear if this will affect enemy archers, as the furthest enemy away from the shot will take 99,000 damage, but I'm not sure if this is only including the enemies that are hit with the silence within a small radius, so this might only affect the tanks and no one else depending on the situation, but hopefully we'll get to see that in the testing. The next is very simple. Allies within a small radius of the Mercenary Set have their piercing increased by 25%. The last paragraph is what helps the team out, which will be hard to compare to other sets. Once in a while, the set will increase the max health of all allies by 25% for 5 seconds. Also at the same time, over 3 seconds, all allies restore 120,000 health, which makes them a good supporting archer. Now the next bit it does say during that period, which to me would insinuate the 3-second period and not the 5-second period, as this was the last statistic mentioned. However, this is not explained very clearly, so it is quite confusing to know which one it's talking about. Either way, the Mercenary Set has their crit increased by 50%, and the enemy with the lowest health becomes the preferred target. And with every fired shot, they take an additional shot at a random enemy. Now this is where the 3 seconds and 5 seconds periods makes a big difference, because if the archer has longer to do double shots, it will massively increase the archer's potential damage. Overall, this makes this archer a very good potential if you want to have someone in your team to deal a lot of damage to tanks if that's what you're struggling with right now, but also have someone in your team who can help keep your team alive with the increased max health and the 120,000 healing in all allies. And now that we've covered the basics of what the Mercenary can do, I'm sure you'll all be excited to see what they can do in the fights to come. But what we need to do now is go over what fights we'll be doing and who we'll be comparing against. Again, I would have loved to have used the Van Helsing set, but because I don't have it, we'll have to use another fighter. And in this case, we'll be comparing against the Bane. And the reason we're doing the Bane is because this set is quite easy to get a hold of and is normally a go-to for a lot of players. So will the more costly Mercenary Set be the better choice to go for, or will it be the same scenario like the other reviews and make more sense to go for the easier 6-piece Bane before going for the Mercenary Set? Today we'll be finding that answer out, and this is how the two fighters stack up with their stats. I've already removed all the runes from the Bane and its artifact to make things as balanced as possible, but there are some things to note before we continue. Firstly, at the top, the Bane has 32,000 more health, and unfortunately I can't add anything to the Mercenary as they haven't got any health gem slots available, and I have removed everything off the Bane to do with that. Secondly, the Bane has nearly half the amount of damage per second, but this shouldn't matter as the Bane's main damage is through its abilities. And finally, on top of the Bane having more health, it also has slightly more armor, magic armor and dodge. So we should expect this to last a lot longer than the Mercenary, and that's not even taking the event items into account that the Bane will be wearing. Right, I think that's all the major things taken into account, so let's now break down the fight scenarios. And with all the fights, I will be adding up the total damage of each fighter and finding out who can deal the most damage. I would also add all the healing done by the Mercenary to see if that actually makes a difference in your choice. So to start with, I'll be doing 10 arena battles, but you'll be seeing the one where both the Bane and Mercenary did their best, 10 fights versus a Throne Room 10 clan boss in Pumbaa, and finally a whole djembe. And with that, I'll be adding up all the totals of each round and putting the total up at the end. And in previous reviews I have done fights versus a 1v1 or smaller teams, but both of these fighters benefit from fighting bigger squads. So in every scenario possible, I will be using my full 7-man squad where I think it will make the most sense. Right, so let's start off with the simple arenas, and I'll be using both of them at the same time, and again I'll be doing 10 fights, but just be showing you both the fights or a single fight where both the Bane and Mercenary did their best. Now with the 10 fights in the arena, initially I did choose to do all the fights versus 20 million plus squads, but I found these results for both fighters to be quite disappointing, and that actually does make some sense as they're going up against full teams that are using runes and artifacts, giving them a big disadvantage already. So rather than competing against the enemy, I have lowered my squad power so they can fit in the 10 million power bracket, and this way they can just face each other on who can deal the most damage. And the best fight that the Mercenary had was this one here, dealing 3.2 million damage. And just for some comparison, the best fight that the Bane had was this one here, which was more than what the Mercenary could do, dealing 4.4 million damage. So after doing these 10 fights in the 10 million power bracket, the Mercenary dealt 16.1 million damage and the Bane dealt 32 million damage, showing us that the Bane will always deal way more damage than what the Mercenary can do versus a full team. But I don't think that's the only thing to take into account. After all 10 fights in total, the Mercenary healed the team for 5.3 million damage, and this number would have been higher if the full team remained standing, and I wasn't just using normal dwellers who would have gone down quite quickly. There are two difficulties with this first lot of roundups. Firstly, like I've mentioned before, if the whole team stayed up in every fight, then the Mercenary would have healed for a lot more, and don't get me wrong, 5.3 million of healing is a lot for 10 short arena fights. But we also have to remember that the Bane would have stayed up longer because of the Mercenary increasing its max health. But let's move on to the Throne Room 8 clan boss in Pumbaa and do 10 rounds against them and see how they do against an enemy that can't be killed and has lots of health to sponge all the damage. And surprisingly, the Mercenary starts to have a better showing against the Bane, but that could be because there's only one enemy, making it harder for the Bane to do well. Either way, the Mercenary did a total of 36.5 million damage and the Bane had done 37.9, so it only just pulled ahead. But what I find even more interesting is how much the Mercenary done in healing for the whole team, with a total amount of 32.7 million. That's nearly the same amount they done in damage even when we compare it to the Bane. So what does this tell us? Well, it means if you have a proper team and everyone can stay up including the Mercenary, they can produce amazing amounts of healing, and especially over a long period of time. But let's look at the last test between the two fighters and have a look at the djembe. And just before we do, make sure you do leave a like if you're enjoying this video so far. So what I've done is complete a run through and added up all the totals as usual, and just to keep things simple, here's the free statistics as usual. But just hang around while I explain a few things. Now again, the Mercenary has fallen behind in a lot of damage by just over double, and the main benefit of the Mercenary is in its healing, but that wasn't always able to be used. In 4 of the fights they weren't able to be used in healing at all as the fights were ending too quickly, and there was another 4 additional times on top of that where the healing was less than 100,000, meaning anyone who did needed healing didn't actually need to receive a lot of it. But let's have a look at all 3 totals added up and I'll give you my final conclusion at the end. Over the 10 arena battles, 10 fights versus Pumbaa and 15 fights in the djembe, the Mercenary dealt 59.6 million damage with a total healing of 40.7 million, and the Bane was able to produce 84 million damage. That's just over 40% more damage in total. And you might be thinking, the damage and the healing the Mercenary put together equals more than the Bane's damage, and yes, you are right. But my issue is that those healing numbers were massively boosted when facing the Pumbaa boss, and not such a realistic statistic versus normal players. So these are the stats altered if we take out the clan boss fights and only show the ones versus players. we can now see that the Bane excels even more, just a smidge under double the damage, and now the healing can't keep up with the offset. So what does this all mean? Well, the Mercenary set has proven to me over the clan boss and djembe fights to really help your team going over long periods of time, and will make a very good supportive archer, but that's exactly where it should stay. If you're looking for all out damage, then the Bane takes a clear victory versus other players, and I'd recommend to go for the Mercenary if you already have a full squad of fighters, and want to just improve your chances in the djembe or with other clan bosses. In the future, they may make improvements to the set just like they did with the Bastion for example, but until then it's not actually going to be worth the hassle. I hope this video has given you some great insight to this set, and please leave a like if you did enjoy it, and make sure to get subscribed if you want to see future set reviews. And here's the other two sets I've already reviewed if you want to check them out now, and finally my A Plague Tale series if you want to see me play a story rich game getting ready for the next release. And thank you all for watching.